Welcome to the Sound of Ages podcast. If you're new, or welcome back if you've listened before, great to have you. Today, we are going to talk about the next piece on the Wind, Water, Stone album, which tends to be a lot of people's favorite, called The Lord of Glory is My Light. And we're going to talk about simple and complexity, and simplicity on the far side of complexity, and as Andrew Maxfield says, potential dumpster candy. I don't know. You can decide. Is it dumpster candy or is it brilliant simplicity? Your call. But we'll talk about it and we'll listen to it at the end of the episode. So don't leave early. Stick around. And this is the Sound of Ages podcast.
She would be pleased. She would be pleased. She would be pleased.
Hello, Drew.
Greetings, Cam.
Dude, that was an epic disco pose.
Yes.
I'm putting that as the thumbnail on YouTube, by the way.
Well, please, yes.
Today, speaking of disco, we have a piece of choral disco. I just tried to work on my segues. I don't know if it's working, but we have an awesome piece, fully prepared to be discussed today with the composer himself, called The Lord of Glory is My Light. And this piece, in several ways, is Drew exploring an opposite of the mag and the nunk, but also keeping true to his principles, because he's a principled composer with skills and craft that guide his every move. So, Drew, speak to us. Spit your words of wisdom about The Lord of Glory is My Light.
All right, Cam. I'll do that. So, The Lord of Glory is My Light. It happened because we had a gig that needed a piece that sounded like this. We're singing we're singing in
That right there is actually the story of history, music history. And I wish that more young composers knew that.
Well, I will dally in one little comic aside here, is that a couple of years ago, probably back in like 2018, I was in Boston and I went to a music conference and the keynote speaker was Peter Schickele, aka PDQ Bach himself. And talk about one of my heroes. I mean, the guy's breadth of musical knowledge, his sense of humor, like you can't find anybody with that special perfect storm besides him. And I got the chance to chat with him and I said, well, what advice do you have for a young composer? And he thought about it, like he wasn't being dismissive. He thought about it. He said, be a working composer. And here's what I mean. He said, when I was an undergrad at Swarthmore College in a music department that was evidently very, very small, he was an unusual kid because he declared himself a composer. He felt like he had a compositional destiny to fulfill, but he just decided that he would write a piece of music for literally anyone and everyone who played anything. And so if he had a friend who played piano, he wrote a piano piece. He'd have a friend who played oboe, he wrote an oboe piece, whatever, just every single opportunity. He said, and in the hallway of the dorm, there was a glass case with a fire hose in it. And my friend and I looked at it and we noticed that the nozzle resembled a brass mouthpiece. So I even wrote for that. And he said, that's what I mean by being a working composer, sort of just seizing the opportunity to write for everybody and anybody all the time. And that it was actually super inspiring for me because, sure, I will write pieces for my own curiosity and satisfaction all the time. But I love collaboration. I'm wired for it. And so if an opportunity presents itself or is even within a long arm's reach,
Yeah.
that is the reason to write a piece of music.
That's amazing. And it makes me think of really quickly another side thing for those of you who are interested in leadership and business. I don't know how many of those of you are there out there, but there's a fantastic book by Liz Wiseman called Impact Players. And one of her main quotes from that book is, "Don't do the job you want to do the job that needs doing."
Mm,
And she talks about how that leads to more and more opportunities, and then it will lead you to be able to do the job that you wanted to do in the first place. But you have more knowledge on the other side than you would have had. And it's really cool. Impact Players. It's a fantastic book. Look at everything with opportunity goggles and just continue to. That's how, well, the funny thing is, that's how I got to into BYU because I was at BYU Idaho, and that's what I did, but on the conducting side, because I
mm,
was in the Student Composer Society, because there wasn't quite a composition program yet or like major. But I went because I was interested in it. But then what I did is I was just like, hey, do you need a conductor for the student composers recital? And so I just kept asking people. And before I knew it, everyone was just assumed that I was essentially the conductor. Not every piece needed it because some of them were solos and small groups. But if anyone needed a conductor, they knew that they could just ask me. And so then I got asked to conduct my friend's senior composition recital, and it was a full hour's worth of conducting, and those videos are what I used to submit. And the opportunity was just like right there. So be a working conductor is also what I would say.
amen. So I still have a little post-it note on the bottom of my computer, which is, and it says, be a working composer. And that's my little note to
Man,
self from that conversation. So
that's so cool.
we had this gig and it was
Yeah.
for the Faith Matters conference, sort of a, um, it's a large gathering, topically related to faith. And we knew we'd have an audience of, I don't know, 400 or 500 people. And we needed an opener. And for whatever reason, we didn't have one. And I thought, oh yeah, I should probably write an opener. And I knew who was singing, knew what the venue was, knew what the mood was that I wanted to evoke. And those parameters were what kind of guided the so-called creative part of the piece. Although I think that parameters are creative too. They cause creative responses. And sometimes the more constrained the parameters are, the more creative the project becomes. I love constraints. Anyway, so because of the context and the place on the program, I thought to myself that we needed a text that would be aspirational and sort of elevating. Um, and I just went digging into Isaac Watts' poetry. He's this sort of legendary.
As one does. I mean, I'm not a poet, so I mean, that is a sentence that has never left my mouth. I just went diving into Isaac Watts' poetry. Like, this is so obvious choice, Drew.
Thank you, Cam. You should
But
dive into Isaac Watts' poetry, it sounds like.
yeah, I really should. I need
Well,
to. Now I have a
he,
list.
yeah, so he was of
So
an era.
what grips you about Isaac Watts, I guess?
Well, he's an interesting guy because so he's born in 1674 in England. He was well educated, very devout, and as a matter of his, I guess, personal devotions, he would read Psalms and then
Hmm,
respond to them by kind of rephrasing or retelling a psalm in his own verse.
cool.
And it tended to be these sort of metrical, rhymed, lyrical verses that are absolutely pre-fashioned for singing. They're just perfect for singing.
Hmm,
And so his hymn texts are all over Christendom. I mean, they're
Yeah.
in just about every hymnal you've ever picked up. And as a result, it's a little bit like, I don't know, it's a little bit like Shakespeare. He's not exactly like coterminous with Shakespeare, but his hymn texts have kind of passed the test of time, and it's not like they're perfect or like they're ever, like perfectly evergreen or whatever, but they just have sort of proven their merit. And so I went looking for something like that because it felt safe, beautiful, public domain. Hey, all the right things. And so
Yeah.
I found a text called "The Lord of Glory is my light." I'm certain it's been set to music before, which bothers me not at all.
Right.
And I looked at it, and it had this kind of aspirational, beautiful language. The Lord of Glory is my light and my salvation too. God is my strength, nor will I fear what all my foes can do. It's just like, come on, come on.
Yeah.
It's
It's
just,
so, and it has this long arc to it, right? Where it's not
mhm.
just like, it's just got this, it's just so flowy, I guess, and feels organic. It kind of like unfolds organically. Yeah. It's,
Yeah, yeah. And so in I took the liberty of modifying a couple words, which, I don't know if there's purists out there who just passed out while listening to this podcast. If so, take heart. Things are okay. But, there's a phrase like, when troubles rise and storms appear, there may his children hide. God has a strong pavilion where it was a little wonky for singing. It's like he had a beautiful image, but the language got a little bit chewy, and so I just made tiny substitutions here and there to make it flow, which I think is okay. With that much remove, that much distance historically. And
yeah.
when I look at the era of the text when Isaac Watts lived, it's hard for me to hear um, almost anything except for this kind of British choral sound attached to words like these. It's almost like it was inevitable or something like that. And so
Oh, yeah.
I reached for a sound that is, kind of rooted in that world. And it tends to have kind of a high tessitura, which it actually is not typical. I don't usually keep people high.
No, no, it's when I think about it, it is very distinct in terms of your output. And when I first got it, I was like, oh gosh, I'm just glad I'm not singing it because B
I
flat
know.
is brutal for me. But that's my own range issues and my own passaggio and all that kind of stuff. But it is, it's one of, but it's bright and it kind of sits up there. It's brassy and vibrant and trumpety and that sort of thing. And that's
Well,
super English.
exactly,
Hmm.
right? Because
Yeah.
if you imagine a choir with that kind of timbre, with those kind of vowels singing in that kind of architecture, when you hear the phrase, "The Lord of glory is my light," you want it to feel like that sort of like shafts of light coming through the stained glass,
Yeah.
right? It
100%, man.
that's how it
I
felt
could
to me.
hear Trinity singing it right now in my head, just across the chapel to each other. Yeah, man.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love that. Anyway, so the those are all just kind of design parameters. We haven't even talked about sound yet. You know what I mean? Um,
But it's
but
amazing how much focus that gives you already, and then how creative you can be. Because the thing that I love about this piece is, and I asked you this question, but it was kind of a leading question, and maybe I'll kind of give my perspective on the answer. Just not good interview etiquette, but whatever. I love how much it's right after the Nunc Dimittis, the doxology on the album, very complex with that ostinato in the
mm,
loop pedal on the guitar in 5/4 with three textures going on at once, two in the voices, one in that ostinato, and then the guitar doing its own thing. The percussion stuff, it's very complex contrapuntal motion and it's amazing. And then you hear this just one ping from the guitar on the B flat, and then you hear this homorhythmic, very simple, but just as elegant and well crafted. Like the craftsmanship is the same,
Mm,
but it's found this simplicity that is in that Anglican, uh, Anglican slash Anglican adjacent realm that it just harangues your attention. After all of that, you get a breath. It's kind of like that last amen, blam. And it's almost like everybody's muscles relax. And then it, instead of like calling you back, it grabs your attention, but keeps you relaxed and has
mm.
this very simple opposite of what we just heard.
Well, I'm glad that you hear it that way because one of the things that I've realized about myself, just by virtue of trial and error, which is the path of composing, or shall I call it error and error? Um,
It's the path of conducting too, and
yeah,
singing, and all of everything in life. So
yeah.
there's another life lesson there. We got all kinds of life lessons going on today.
My trial of error after error after error. Um, no, but I realized that there's a couple things. One is that I like all sorts of stuff. I really do. Music is like this gigantic, beautiful, fascinating house that has like 1,000 windows and no doors. And the best thing that you can do to get a view all the way into the house is just look through as many windows as possible. And you never get to go all the way inside. I mean, the joke would be like, well, Bach did, and maybe that's true, and that would be really irritating. But it probably is true. Um,
Him and Arvo Pärt are sitting in there alone.
yeah, 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 seriously. Uh, but
Anyway,
but I just, there are very few windows that I've looked through that I didn't just love and find fascinating. And that's true if I'm up at 2 in the morning at the Blue Note listening to the Robert Glasper Trio, or if I'm in an orchestra hall hearing Bartok, or if I'm at Choral Evensong at Trinity, or you fill in the blank, and I'm like, I am just here for this. I love this. Music is why I'm here.
mm, yeah, man. It's that
Right?
simplicity on the far side of complexity, right? Because you
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
get bogged down, but you find it again. And I think this piece is a perfect example of you finding that simplicity on the far
Mm,
side of complexity.
mm,
Because I know like a lot of people will conflate the definition of counterpoint and polyphony as if
ooh.
they're one and the same.
Mm,
But but that's the great thing is like real counterpoint is not because first species is still counterpoint and that's note against note. And so maybe talk us through now a
sure.
little bit of the nuts and bolts of kind of the verses
Yeah, yeah,
of
yeah.
this piece.
I'll share my screen so that I can
Yeah.
share the score and also a little bit of audio too, if all goes well. Oh, score got lodged somewhere between my monitors. There it is. Yeah, but in terms of following on the heels of the Nunk, I just like lots of things. And I think in the long run, people will probably talk about John Adams as being an eclectic composer. Like he's written a
Hmm.
lot of things that don't sound like each other. I'd love to be an eclectic composer. That makes me happy.
Yeah.
I'm as content writing a 12 bar blues as I am writing kind of an Anglican adjacent motet as I am writing a crazy uh
Complex symphony.
doxology that's in 5/4 with assorted percussion or a symphony or whatever. So here's kind of the theory and vibe of this. So we start, as you said, in a really bright place. Do you hear that, by the way?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this bright B flat sonority, which means that like home bass for the soprano is already up in a little bit of a chirpy register, but I don't mind that um because why? Well, if you think about a cathedral choir with boy sopranos and this kind of thin, I don't want to call it chirpy, but there's this very special sound that lives way up there.
Yeah.
So when you look at the melody, it isn't actually all that It isn't all of that distinctive. Just like, some major scale noodles. I'm going to turn the audio on that down just to tear it a little bit because it feels quite loud in my ears.
It's
Um,
actually, if you can handle it, it's actually just right.
oh, is it? Okay, then I
Yeah.
will.
And on the previous episode, it was actually just a little bit quiet and it
Oh,
was hard to
so
hard
how's
to pick
this?
up. So it's awesome. If it's blasting your ears out, I'm sorry, but it's probably just about right.
Okay. All right. Fine, 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 fine. Great. My
Love
ear,
it.
my ears will be sacrificed very happily for this. So the point is that I'm not trying to write an unforgettable melody. We've talked about that on previous episodes.
Yeah.
And counterpoint, if you take it as the study of line, what you're really striving for is coherence. You want to create linear coherence. And sometimes you can use that in service of writing your hit melody that nobody will ever forget. Sometimes you get a hit melody by breaking all of the principles of counterpoint and
Right.
writing a one note samba or whatever. And that's great too. But when I talk to students, I say that it's kind of like there's four corners in the ring, and in one corner you've got scale. We know what that is, stepwise motion. Another corner we've got arpeggio. We know what that is, movement
Mhm.
by leaps. In the other corner, we have melody. We all intuitively feel like we know what a melody is. And then in the fourth corner, kind of like lurking in the darkness, is counterpoint, and that's the study of line. Line. And
Right.
I'm interested in line more than I am in this piece than in writing an unforgettable melody. But when you look at the way that the chords move from one to the next, and I'm hovering on that chord for a reason,
Yeah, dude.
the harmonies are not remarkable, right? Because it's one,
Right.
four. Sorry, what?
1-5.
No, I thought you were saying something else. So 1 5, 4 in first inversion, 5 in first inversion, 1, and then we get down into the first inversion, into the four
One first
chord. I
inversion.
mean, talk about like ordinary sounding stuff in a common practice vernacular, right? But
Yeah.
getting the spacing and the doubling to be uh, to be effective is the job of harmony, and it matters to me that I attend to those little details. So getting that bright, confident, resonant sound comes from attending to those details. But one of my favorite composers is a British composer named Francis Pott, a really uh, gentle, generous soul, and an amazing composer, polyphonist that
Yeah.
I wish I could be like someday. But one of the things I've noticed from his music is that he never tolerates a boring cadence. And so when we
Mm.
land on "And My Salvation Too," I don't want to just land on "And My Salvation Too." That feels a little underwhelming, and it doesn't feel like it's loaded with forward momentum. And this isn't a particularly tangy example, but if you do this, you're finishing the word on this harmony.
Yeah. Oh man, that bass and alto together is so propelling.
You can't help but feel like, oh, we need to go somewhere. And where we go then is,
Mm.
and as we move through that passage, again, none of this is revolutionary. It's strictly diatonic. We're using sort of common practice, doubling and spacing. But what I'm trying to do is manage a sense of forward motion where we just feel
Yeah.
like we must keep moving. And the way that people have done that historically is by mastering patterns, cadential formulas, sequential patterns, and those are all the devices that get us from one beat to the next. And this is very homorhythmic, certainly compared to the mag and the nunc that we've just talked about. Um, and in the moments where you could say it's polyphonic, it's just little line level decorations. But at the same time, at the level of counterpoint, every voice, each line should have its own rhetoric and architecture that just keeps the thing moving.
Yeah. And that's what I love about singing. I mean, I haven't really sung with Sound of Ages before. I mean, here or there. But when I sing through every piece that you send and I sing through it before I give it to the singers, it's like, oh man, I would love to be the alto in this one. Oh man, I'd love to be. And then the next part, I'd love to be the tenor in this one. Oh man, I'd love to be the bass. I say that about every part. And that's what, to me, it sounds simple. It even looks simple on the page. But even in execution, there's something that compels you toward it because of the craft of real line versus just thinking chord, 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 chord. Because I've seen pieces from theory students or young composers when they want to have me look at a piece of theirs that is chord, 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 chord. It's chordally conceived, and it the lines don't sing this way.
Well, there's good reason for that because the sort of default teaching of harmony in most like undergrad classrooms,
And AP
we
music theory, by the way.
and AP music theory. I mean, we even use words like harmony and theory interchangeably as though those were the
Yeah.
same ideas, which I think is
Oh man. Yeah.
kind of a crazy tell right up front. But it's very
Yeah.
vertical, it's very Germanic, it's very blocky. And what you wind up with is this basic notion where it's like, okay, get from one verticality that can easily be identified with a Roman numeral to the next, and don't have any parallel fifths or octaves, and do as little damage as possible with your voice leading, and then move on to the next blocky, you know,
Yeah.
Roman numeral unit.
Right.
And
Yeah.
the thing is that I feel like that I'm not saying that theory teaching really embraces that, but it's easy for people to assume that that's how music really works.
Yeah. Without because so many instructors are doing their best like because I don't want to criticize at all either because I get it. But it's like y- you have to help frame the students in the language that it is and help them see that as one tiny small part of the picture, not as the whole picture. And I think a lot of times implicitly it comes across as this is the whole picture instead
Yeah.
of, oh, this is one small piece of the pie. Let's look at it from zoomed way out, 10,000 feet, so you can see how it fits in with line because this came first.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I subscribe personally to more of a French tradition, but also totally to a contrapuntal way of seeing things where counterpoint produces lines and lines aggregate to produce harmony. Like harmony is a byproduct of counterpoint. And I think that sort of this like Germanic obsession with Roman numerals, yeah, it totally makes sense because it's easy to test. It's easier
Yeah.
to teach. It's
Yep.
harder and more time consuming and um, unreasonable in some ways to have this kind of contrapuntal obsession with line. But I think that's where the real music making is. Because when you hear a piece that just like grabs you by your face and pulls you through time, and you're like, wow, every single
Yeah.
instant feels inevitable, and I absolutely have to know where this is going.
Because
It,
it's that paradox of inevitable and thrillingly surprising at the same time.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go get out there and say that it's not Roman numerals that are giving you that sensation. It just
Boom.
isn't.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
So then when we move through this verse, because this piece to zoom back out for just 2 seconds, it's
Hmm.
strophic.
Hmm.
So we
Yeah.
have this verse,
Yeah.
and then we have a refrain, and then we have another verse that's very similar, and then we have another refrain, and then we
Hmm.
have a very simple outro that is like another verse. And so when we
Yeah.
get to the refrain, when troubles rise and storms appear, there may his
Mm.
children hide, there in God's shelter. It's such a cool thing. And now all of a sudden, the texture, it doesn't shift really just by looking at the page, but the sound sure does, and the tone sure does, and the timbre sure does.
Yeah. Well, so one thing that I did as a composer is that I overlaid a song form,
Yeah.
right? You know, like this, I'm not writing this as though this were a hymn,
Hmm.
and that wasn't my intention from the outset. And so if you look at it musically, you would see a song form that's essentially A, B, and then, like you said, kind of an A outro.
Yeah.
And that's one way in which it's different from what you might think of as just a standard hymn tune, which is just a single, frequently kind of like a single, cycle through
Yeah.
whatever the form the hymn takes. And so when we get here, we're coming out of something that does feel a little bit hymnish with the homorhythmic stuff, and then we have this not just hymn-like, but also a little bit sort of measured and not overly emotionally juicy. But then we come to
Mm.
this thing that is this transition into the, you might call it chorus, refrain, however you want to think about it, um, with the tenutos and the retard and this big swell, right? And so far we haven't
Mhm.
had that kind of notation. When troubles rise, bum, 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 boom, woo, woo. And what we have right there is a downbeat, a strong beat, minor 11 chord. Boom, 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 woo. And we haven't heard that yet,
Yeah.
right? We've been staying almost exclusively triadic. I
Yeah.
haven't I haven't scanned back to make sure that that's the gospel truth, but at this moment, everybody's ears, whether they notice it or not, are probably perking up just a little teeny tiny bit because you have something that's not far off from triadic harmony. I mean, we're still working in that language, but we have an added note and it's tall and it broadens the total range. It expands the dynamic. And I think if there were sort of like the juicy emotion meter or something like that, if there was a knob that was
Yeah.
being turned, it goes right.
Yeah, and this is
And
where
then
we first hear the guitar, and we have a phase
yeah, yeah,
sweep as well. We do the cool phase sweep, which is, and the baritone guitar with it. Oh my gosh, like it's so, and like you've said, we've had this metric feel, but it's really kind of been almost reminiscent. We tried to do it molto mega rubato of Anglican chant like, where it's push and pull, but within this kind of wave-like pulsing nature. And then, I mean, this is almost completely out of time
yeah, yeah.
that we chose to do it. It's
Well, and I mean, here's the thing: is like I was joking with you and some of the other singers that when I got to this moment, my little songwriter intuition was kind of like, "Do troubles rise?" Whoops, rise and
a little scoop.
storms appear. It just feels like it goes cheese ball for a moment. Certainly, if I perform it that way. And I was joking that I suddenly went dumpster diving, which is totally a silly thing to say to begin with, but I remember Dale and the tenor saying, yeah, keep that dumpster open, man.
Dude, keep the
And
dumpster open, man. I just will never forget him saying that. Dude, keep it open. This is awesome. This is so good. So,
so it's the same
yeah,
thing. You
it's
get a minor
so
11 chord.
contemplative.
Yeah, minor 11 chord, which is, let's be honest, probably my favorite chord. You can't play Herbie Hancock without just
Uh,
loving that chord.
yeah,
So here it is, and then it moves us to there, and then it
yeah,
resolves back into that kind of primarily triad language. And we kind of step back just a little bit from the big, juicy stuff. There, may his children hide. There, in God's shelter, he makes my soul abide. And then we're back into that kind of the chant
yeah.
style verse, homorhythmic, and when the
And then when the
chorus
oh,
comes back, it lifts a
yeah,
little bit higher.
right, and it's even the emotional juiceometer is really high and imperceptible at that moment, comparative to everything else, because it's been so Anglican and stoic and like brassy, bright, lifted, but still very reserved in a lot of ways. And I think that's what makes it even more compelling when we get to the second refrain.
Yeah, I hope so. And I feel like I never want people in the audience to feel like they need a music degree to understand what I'm doing or to enjoy what I'm doing or something like that. Because I think that obsessive composers end up thinking about the wrong things routinely. But I frequently think about people in the audience. I imagine them and like, what can they perceive? Well, you can perceive contrast, right? And Nadia
Hmm.
Boulanger, I think this is in the Quincy Jones biography. She says, um, um, belief, knowledge, feeling, attachment, sensation, the type of music is immaterial
Mm.
if you're striving for these qualities, right?
Yeah, man,
And
that's
I
really
think
good.
so I imagine somebody sitting there and you've been hearing this kind of this sort of even chant. And when it's
Mm.
done when it's done so well, like in service and stuff, it feels like a singular voice that's speaking to you sort of from heaven or something like that, right?
Totally agree.
And you attune yourself to that voice so that then when this moment of contrast comes, there's this welling of sensation that happens that you haven't been attaching to the chant. So when troubles, here's the 13 or the 11 chord, but then we just dial it up. It's not particularly hard to tune. Dum, dum, dum.
Right.
It's not a shocking
And it's a
sonority.
great ah vowel of rise.
Mm,
Yeah,
mm.
it's really great.
And call it dorky, but it rises on the word rise.
Which
You know what I mean?
too much heavy-handed text painting is a little not as refined, I guess, but it's still subtle. And this is like the audience doesn't even wouldn't even be able to articulate that that's what's happening, but they can feel it.
Yeah,
Like they
yeah.
know that that musical gesture and the text is connected right there in that moment.
Right. And so your upper three voices are just doing totally natural.
Yeah.
And then your lower voices shift from a very bold sound in a bold register. But as they move up, they change the timbre into something kind of floaty or light. And that's a sound that I like a lot, where you move through ranges and you shift timbres into this kind of shimmer.
Yeah. Where it feels more like all treble voices kind of,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, love it.
It's like a source of color and variation without actually flipping that many switches. And then the same
Yeah.
thing happens next, right? And storms up here. And here's where it gets bigger. We have the tenor line lifting. I'm like, oh yeah, this is gonna sing.
Oh yeah.
Like that's just gonna sing. And the same thing in the upper voices, though. It's not particularly aggressive. There are no accidentals. I don't think in the no, there's one accidental in the cadence earlier on, but this is That's not really wild writing, but when you have it on the word appear,
Yeah.
and you get this, it's funny because like in a theory class, they're going to say, now don't have parallel octaves between your voices. And so this moment between the tenor and the soprano would be verboten in your theory class. But then when you think about the actual contrapuntal structure, you're like, no, 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 because this moment is not actually an issue of parallelism. This is an orchestration move, right? This is like where
Right.
you have your French horn here and a trumpet up above sweetening the same expression of the same line, and they're in like it's like the planets come into alignment for a moment, and it's beautiful because of that. Or it's like the
Yeah.
way that
It makes me think
we
of
stack woodwinds or something.
right, and it makes me think of a like a fountain pen where it's just one line and then all of a sudden you just turn it a little bit so the line gets a little thicker
Yeah,
and
yeah,
gives it some character. Like yeah, because
yep,
that's exactly how it plays out in the piece and time of and then you hear so it's like this one line and then it gets thicker for a second and then you hear the soprano just like step down at the last second, kind of in that Francis Pot type of philosophy of not letting the cadence be too plain
yeah.
to give us a seven. Like it ends on, G minor seven, which is so I that's my favorite sonority is minor seven. I just can't get enough of that sonority. So it's just so cool because it feels so neutral at the same time. And
Oh yeah, because
anyway,
I think those kinds of sonorities are great because they're ambiguous. It feels major, it feels minor, and it's both.
yes,
And
exactly.
isn't it a great world where things can be two things at once? Like that's what keeps music interesting. And it also
Man,
points to this convergence that follows the caesura because you have the two soprano voices that are converging on the E flat.
yeah,
It pulls them because we're coming out of a
together.
thicker texture. This is the six voice version for Sound of Ages. And so we're pulling them out of this um, shimmery, bright, intense, six voice timbre back into the next thing we hear, which is this C minor seven. Like we're starting to enter the denouement where everything's going to
Yeah,
cool and clarify and sort of come back down towards the ground where it's eventually just going to settle comfortably on the ground. And that's the goal of the rest of the piece.
yeah. And it just kind of lands perfect with this little floaty thing up at the top at the end. And uh so this has turned into several people have come up and like, oh man, that was our favorite piece of the concert. And it was because the dumpster was open, man. And well-crafted dumpster candy, to quote Andrew Maxfield, is very enjoyable to audiences everywhere. But it's because it's well crafted and it's simplicity on the far side of complexity. And there's all of these very intentional choices. And it's not just chord, 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 and it's still counterpoint and it's still line, even though it's homorhythmic 90%, 95, 97% of the time.
Yeah.
And
I
that's
mean, I
that's the one thing that I love.
the dumpster comment I just think is kind of funny because for whatever reason, like left to my own devices, if I'm just gonna write something that's fun and interesting to me, I frequently tend towards like kind of janky, angular sounding harmonies and a lot of polyphonic activity. And I
Yeah,
want to tell an interesting story, And it's like
right.
it's like a quirky joke where the punchline you laugh at the punchline, but you also are like, wow, that was weird, maybe that's just my sense of humor or something like that. And so I feel like sometimes the last thing that I'm good at writing is the the flowy, pleasant choral
Yeah.
thing that, that's like the bread and butter of choral things. But maybe I should try that more often. That's
You
the
should.
that's the lesson I'm taking from this podcast, Cam.
Yes, we need a whole batch of Isaac Watts simple, amazing, quote unquote dumpster candy beauty, you know?
Yeah,
Because
let me know when you've
it
written
really
it. That
is.
sounds great.
Well, it will not be beautiful and it won't be candy. Maybe just the dumpster if I were to write it. Well, so let's take a listen then to The Lord of Glory is My Light as it appears on Wind, Water, Stone.
The Lord of glory is my light, and my salvation too. God is my strength, nor will I fear what all my foes can do. One privilege my heart desires, oh, grant me an abode among the churches of thy saints, among the temples of my God. When troubles rise and storms appear, there may his children hide, there in God's shelter. He makes my soul abide. There shall I offer my requests and see thy beauty still, shall hear thy messages of love, and there inquire of thy will. When troubles rise and storms appear, there may his children hide, there in God's shelter. He makes my soul abide.
Thank you for joining us today. So hopefully you had a chance to decide, is it dumpster candy or brilliant simplicity? I think it's the latter. Yeah. But it's a great piece. Check out the album Wind, Water, Stone, coming out on May 22nd, 2026. And don't forget to sign up for Sound of Age's email list. Look at our events page. We'll be announcing our next season pretty soon. And check all things out on the group.